Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start. There's still a lot of seats empty, so may I invite you to take your seats, please. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a last call before we start. Please take your seats. There's a lot of seats empty still, so come closer, come to the stage so we can start our party. Ladies and gentlemen, may I please invite you to take your seats in front of the stage so we can start our show. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our speakers are ready to talk to you, to share their views with you. So without delay, may I insist to take your seats so we can start. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the start of the Future Forward Festival, celebrating the 60th anniversary of Antwerp Management School. And I look a bit up in the air to say hi as well and welcome to the people who are following the live stream on Facebook and YouTube, wherever you are, on a sandy beach, in the mountains, just at home in front of your laptop. Welcome as well, and it's nice to have you here with us tonight. For the next 3 days, ladies and gentlemen, this business school will prove that it has been, it is, and it will continue to be a source of inspiration, innovation, and leadership. So the festival will offer you workshops, talks, debates, pitches, management pitches, investment pitches, and so on. Seems to be all very seriously for a festival. Well, no doubt there will be entertainment as well, and lots of music, free music, in a truly festive atmosphere as well for the next 3 days. So tonight the celebrations will be kicked off with a panel debate with international guests such as Winston Ma, Robert Burgelman, and Cindy Mabaso Koyana. The discussion will be followed by the celebration of the winner of the Global Citizen Award 2019. And we will finish tonight, as a festival should be finished, with music, with a concert by Jeff Neve and Teus Nobel. That's for later tonight. That's how we will finish. Before going ahead, before starting the real first part, I have to tell you something more of a security guideline. Of course, this will be a beautiful night, and the nature might want to have some more spectacular way of partying. Thunderstorms are expected. We don't know if they will be right above us or not. In any case, if the weather turns really bad, there are 3, I look like a stewardess now, 3 exits. One on your right, if you look behind you, one in the middle of the platform, and one on the left. Concerning the right and the middle, right behind you, you have stairs going down to the main hall. When people take the left exit, you will have to take a little left before finding the stairs as well. So everything is foreseen that you can leave as soon as possible. May I suggest that people here on the right would take the right exit, people more in the middle take the middle exit, and people on the left would take the left door and stairs. Thank you. So that's for the security, and now we can really kick off this Future Forward Festival with the opening speech by Mr. Stephen Haas, the Dean of Antwerp Management School. Your applause, please.
Good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am thrilled to see so many familiar faces tonight. Friends, alumni, partners, and supporters of the school. Thank you for joining our celebration, and it's a real honor for me to open and kick off this evening with a, don't worry, brief but formal opening speech. 60 years ago, within the roots of our parent and strategic partner, the University of Antwerp, our founding fathers wrote the very first mission statement of Antwerp Management School. They stated, and I quote, "The role of the school is to cultivate participants in the art of making decisions and leading people. A form of art which first and foremost is rooted in a noble attitude and lifestyle. And I would like to repeat the letter. A form of art first and foremost rooted in a noble attitude and lifestyle. How cool is that? And how surprisingly to the point were they 60 years ago already? Given the global challenges, the bewildering degree of complexity, and the radical transformations we face in society today. Over those past 60 years, Antwerp Management School has delivered more than 25,000 alumni to society, all global and impactful leaders. These alumni come from almost 90 different nationalities. As such, we are a true international community and management school. All of us in Antwerp Management School feel privileged to be part of this heritage of 60 years. The celebration today and the coming days in our new campus, where we are gathered now, is the next milestone in our existence and the kickoff of yet another 60 years of Antwerp Management School, at least. 60 more years of opening minds to impact the world. Opening minds to impact the world. That is the DNA of Antwerp Management School. This is not just something we embrace within our walls, but a mission that we proudly bring out to society as well. And not only in words, but also in actions. And tonight I would like to share with you two examples, just two examples, of how we at Antwerp Management School walk our talk. The first example. 10 years ago, at the 50th anniversary of the school, the Antwerp Management School Fund for Sustainable and Innovative Entrepreneurship was created. The purpose of this Antwerp Management School Fund is to give talented recent graduates or young professionals from less developed countries the opportunity to obtain a master's degree at Antwerp Management School. But this is only the first step. When these students return to their home region, they are coached in developing their own business idea so that they can generate a deep and sustainable impact within their local community. We are very proud to announce that our fund has received an enormous extra boost through Professor Walter Corleu. Walter Corleu has held top leadership positions in the banking industry and was active in both Antwerp Management School as the University of Antwerp in finance, or as a professor in finance. But he always had a heart for cultivating talent in developing countries. He would have loved to be here with us tonight, but he is currently in Ecuador, engaged in local community work. Professor Walter Corleu will be supporting our fund in a very substantial way the coming years, allowing us to grant multiple scholarships per year to students from developing countries. As such, enabling them and us to have a deep and sustainable impact on global society. On behalf of the entire Antwerp Management School team, of course, we would like to express our gratitude towards Professor Walter Corleu for his trust in our school and for enabling us to jointly pursue our core mission. And together have that substantial impact on the world. And of course, you should expect this, I would like to take the opportunity to invite all of you to also contribute to our fund, and in this way grant talented individuals access to education and development, and enable them and us to make a strong contribution to their community. The fund is managed by the Koning Boudewijn Stichting, and all our staff are happy to give you support if you are interested in supporting this great movement. Next to the fund, as a second example, every 2 years, Antwerp Management School recognizes an exceptional and inspiring person who has a lasting impact on our society, and has the honor of presenting this individual with the Global Citizen Award. This prestigious award is a recognition for a role model leader who has focused on integrating and spreading a number of values during their career that are also high on the agenda of Antwerp Management School. In particular, the areas of self-awareness, global perspective, and societal consciousness, which all contribute to better collaboration and partnerships, an inclusive environment that recognizes and values diversity, and sustainable transformation in a highly dynamic world. Our global citizen of tonight clearly walked the IMS talk, and we look forward to walking that path further with him and all of you. It is a great pleasure to announce that this year the Global Citizen Award goes to an admirable designer in the Belgian fashion industry, Dries van Noten. Let's celebrate Dries van Noten with you tonight, and of course we thank him already for accepting our award. Opening minds to impact the world. That has been the heartbeat of the school for more than 60 years. And on the rhythm of that same heartbeat, we are now ready for yet another 60 years, at least. We at Antwerp Management School feel privileged to play a strong contributor role in society. And we know that you share the Antwerp Management School spirit and sparkle. Our shared passion, energy, and vibe is not only demonstrated through our Antwerp Management School Fund, our Global Citizen Award, and of course our brilliant new campus. But it is also demonstrated in the new brand that I hope you have all seen while walking through the campus, which will be launched as of today in the market. And you should see now. Thank you. All of these elements are clear demonstrations of the DNA we share and breathe together. Openness, transparency, ambition, innovativeness, sustainability, eagerness to learn and grow. We also call ourselves slightly rebellious and atypical, and will always keep a focus on lasting impact. The facts and the numbers prove our ambitions. More than 500 full-time and part-time degree students on campus every year. More than 50 nationalities on campus every year. Top rankings of our international programs, including for our executive MBA, a position 4 worldwide on the way we integrate sustainability, and a position 20 worldwide on our global and international approach. Numerous impactful startups and corporate innovations through our alumni. Many impactful chairs co-created with industry. And foremost, a brilliant team of staff and faculty at Antwerp Management School. All of us. And a trusted network of alumni, partners and stakeholders, all of you. We are ready, together with you, to be fully future-proof for at least another 60 years. Thank you and enjoy the celebration.
Thank you, Dean of Antwerp Management School, Steven de Haas. And Steven, may I invite you to stay here on stage and take your place, because you will be participating in the next part of this festival, the first day, I should say, of this festival, being the panel debate. A debate on the future, which to me seems to be a very broad concept. What is the future? I haven't got my crystal ball with me today, maybe you either. If you hear the news of the last few days, economic news, financial news, environmental news, future can be scary, and that's maybe an understatement. If you see the students here and how eagerly they want to start to study at this business school, the future seems to be hopeful as well. And I'm sure our international guests will have a lot of more different points of views on the future tonight. So, please, warmly welcome our following speakers from China. Winston Ma Wenyan. From the United States, Robert Bergelman. And from South Africa, Mrs. Cindy Mabaso Koyana. And tonight's moderator, please a big applause for Peter de Keizer.
Okay, good evening everybody. Do I still have a microphone on? Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Good evening everybody. So first of all, on behalf of me and I think the rest of the panel as well, happy 60th birthday for the Antwerp Management School. Tonight we will be talking about sustainable transformation, and I just saw in the opening speech of Professor de Haas that the mission of Antwerp Management School is opening minds to impact the world. So we have a lot of brilliant minds on the stage, a lot of minds to be opened or opened further in the audience, and we're going to talk about the world during this panel debate, which will last about 1 hour. There's a number of topics we will tackle. We'll talk about digitalization, talk about China, Africa, inequality, and the future of Europe, and we'll do that in about 1 hour. And of course, we can only do that with very brilliant minds we have on stage here. So let me introduce the different speakers that you see here. On my left, we have Cindy Mabaso Koyana. She's a well-known entrepreneur and corporate leader in South Africa. And apart from serving on countless boards, she's also been appointed Deputy Chairperson of the Audit and Compliance Committee at FIFA. Now, that seems to be a challenging job, I would say. She's also the Executive Chairperson of AWCA Investment Holdings, a women-owned and managed investment company. And I'm sure her expertise, especially on equality as well as Africa's future, will be very valuable in tonight's discussion. Secondly, we have Professor Steven de Haas on my left, who apart from being the Dean at the Antwerp Management School, also does research and teaches in different IT-related domains, IT governance and management, IT strategy and alignment, IT value and performance management. So I think as long as there's IT in the world, basically he is an expert on it. He also coaches organizations in their digital strategies and business technology management. In short, he's a perfect guest to tell us more about the challenges we face in the interconnected world we live in today. On my right, we have Winston Ma. He's an investor, author, as well as adjunct professor in digital economy. Ma was a managing director of the China Investment Corporation, the country's sovereign wealth fund, which has more than $800 billion in investable assets. This makes Ma the ideal guest to talk about China's position in the world and the challenges also China faces in a globalizing and digital world. Additionally, Ma wrote books on China's mobile internet economy and China's data economy. And last year, Ma has even called the digital divide the single biggest challenge to sustainable global development, both for individuals as well as companies. And finally, we have on my far right, Professor Robert Bergelman. And being here must be a bit like coming home for him, because he started his academic career here in Antwerp, and over the subsequent years, he studied at Columbia University and started lecturing at Stanford University in 1981, where he taught ever since. Professor Bergelman's research is focused on the strategy-making processes involved in how companies enter into new businesses and exit from existing ones to secure continued adaptation. And his insights obviously will shed light on the challenges that firms and industries will have to tackle in the years to come. So what we will talk about today is digitalization, China, Africa, equality, and future of Europe. And what we will do for every topic, we will introduce it by a very small movie, which will give a bit of an insight into the different challenges, and then we'll have a discussion on each topic. So I suggest we will start with the short movie on digitalization.
The world has become interconnected at a pace that none of us had expected.
We live in a day and age where we have access to a great amount of data, and we need to leverage that data to really drive insights.
The World Economic Forum launched the Digital Transformation Initiative in 2015. It is a multi-year engagement analyzing the impact of digital transformation on individual sectors, on the enterprise, and on society at large.
It's about the connected world, every device, every person. And it's about data and the data that comes from that connected world. And then it's about the intelligence on top of that, those connected devices and data that are allowing us to rethink experiences for customers and the way the world works.
It can't be appreciated enough how radical a transformation the mobile phone and mobile devices are going to make to organizations around the world.
We are going to see the transformation of governments, of political systems, of institutions, of education.
One of the notable findings of this project is the development of a unique economic framework which actually identifies and quantifies the impact of digital on industry as well as society.
What we can tell is that more value is out there for society than for industry. Roughly $20 trillion is at stake, but actually if you extrapolate it out, it could be well worth over $100 trillion.
The fascinating thing for brands now is how do you become a valuable part of the dialogue between the product and the consumer?
The expectations of consumers today is instantaneous. If they've thought about it and it hasn't happened yet, you're too late.
Not all is lost for incumbents.
They have more assets than we do. They have people, they have money, they have experience, they have audience.
Companies have to be keenly aware of developments in adjacent sectors and analyze what really the developments are in these other industries.
Those companies that partner, that approach this with an open sensibility, are going to get much more value out of their data than those that use traditional business models.
GE is a good example. They seem to be willing to experiment, to be good co-investors, and to, frankly, help a lot of companies that otherwise would have been too small for them to care.
The idea of outcomes becomes very important. For example, with Michelin, the tire company, providing an outcome of more efficient vehicle utilization rather than selling tires.
In our work with one of the leading digital governments in Europe, we've identified that through e-commerce, up to 6.6 days per capita can be saved on a 10-year time horizon. We are now working with this government in public-private collaboration to identify how we can unlock these 6.6 days saved per citizen at an earlier stage.
Okay, so from the smartphones in our pockets to 5G networks as well as artificial intelligence, our world is changing at an unprecedented rate. And this requires a high degree of adaptability on the part of industries, schools, countries as a whole, and of course ourselves. And let's hear what our guests have to say on this enormous economic and societal evolution. Mr. Ma, if you look at the digital transformation we've seen, obviously we've seen a number of examples in this video. What do you think that the challenges we all underestimate today?
Great question. Because if we look at the video, right, you may notice or you may not have noticed that actually in that video, the words digital and data appeared more often than the word internet and mobile. Relating to that, right, is the shift from the focus on the consumers to the focus on enterprises. Actually, that's why I had my first earlier book, 2016 book on China's mobile economy, focusing on the mobile internet. And for that, the focus is more about connectivity, eyeballs, user traffic, right? But today, 2019, as we focus on the data economy, we're talking about the enterprises that are going to transform themselves. And what makes this special, and exactly on your question, underestimated, is that actually the enterprises are behind. The enterprises are behind the users, right? If you think about the time of emails, it starts with the schools and then become personal, right? But today, every day, ordinary person, they're using facial recognition technology to open their phone, right? When they go to video streaming sites, they're receiving recommendations based on machine learning and AI. But for enterprises, for schools, right, we're not even close using that kind of technologies in everyday operation. So I think the transformation of the enterprises, how the industry will transform themselves to catch up with the well digitally educated users is a underestimated challenge.
Okay, I want to move to Professor De Haas when it comes to that topic. There was a woman in the video who said, if consumers think about something and it doesn't exist yet, you're basically too late. Now that's a big challenge for companies to deal with consumers who expect something to exist that they just thought about. And so how will digital evolution or digitization actually impact the way that companies have to operate if they need that kind of speed?
Well, on your initial statement and your question, it's clear that the speed of change and complexity will only increase. So I think as a result, it's difficult for organizations to make a statement about how the business will change the coming years. In that sense, I think it also doesn't make a lot of sense to assume that you can make a high-level strategic plan for the coming 5 years and then stick to the plan. I don't say that I don't believe you have to build up a strategic plan. I think you still have to do that. But I also think that organizations should operate in a more agile way when they build up their strategic planning. It's also what we do in Antwerp Management School. We also face digital challenges, and we have laid out a mission for the coming 5 years. But every quarter we reiterate and try to have an outside-in look on what is happening outside and how might we need to change the strategic plan. And the evolutions in digital are, of course, a constant consideration in that debate.
When it comes to digitalization and the whole Industry 4.0 digitalization, we often think about China, the US, a bit of Europe. Africa is totally overlooked when it comes to that. How do you perceive the impact of digitalization on a continent as vast as Africa? We have some simplistic ideas that the cell phone is going to transform Africa. Is it that simple, or is it a more nuanced picture?
Well, the World Economic Forum had indicated that by 2050, about 5 million jobs would be lost in South Africa only through digitization. So obviously that creates panic. At the same time, we need digitization in order for us to leapfrog and deal with the economic growth that we are challenged with at the moment. The last few years, we used to see double-digit growth in the continent, which has now come down to about 4%, but still much ahead of the global focus of 3%. So one of the key things, if you look at South Africa in particular, is that this creates a tension, because already in South Africa we've got unemployment rate of 29%, almost 30%. So how do we deal with this? Truth is, we can't not digitize, but at the same time, how do we do it in such a manner that we deal with our own unique issues? You look at the petrol attendance issue, where in the continent and in South Africa in particular, we have run away from making the customer to fill up their own cars, and we still allow petrol attendants that are employed in numbers in the continent. But there are opportunities in leapfrogging technology, especially in the outlying areas which do not have energy, no water. You've mentioned telecoms. In this particular case, on the energy side, renewable energy has got a huge opportunity because we do not have enough infrastructure across the continent. So there are opportunities. What is needed is that governments look into the impact in a very critical way without just saying digitization is here. But the reality is that we also can't shy away from it, because that is what's going to assist us to see the levels of growth that we'd like to be able to deal with the poverty in the continent. So our challenge is a bit schizophrenic.
Okay, thank you very much. Professor Bergelman, I mean, your research has dealt with strategy-making processes, looking at how companies enter into new businesses, exit from existing ones, to secure continued adaptation. Now, I can imagine that the onset of the internet, the data-driven economy, digital economy, there's not been a single bigger challenge to, let's say, a company's adaptation than this. I mean, how do you see this evolving in the years to come?
All right, well, it's not only digitalization, it's also broadband. It's the combination of the two that has led to a convergence or collision of industries, right? Even in the healthcare industry, if you are a radiologist, you now worry that your radiological picture can be analyzed in India as opposed to by your radiologist in Belgium. That's a very serious, if you want, development. I think I'm going to do two things. I think first I think the Dean mentioned the rate of change. And I think that is really important, because you asked the question, what is the capacity of an organization to change at a rate that is commensurate or even faster than the rate of the change itself? Otherwise, you fall behind. And so I'll tell one story to show that this is not completely new. So I did a lot of research on a company called Intel Corporation. that transformed itself from a semiconductor memory company into a microprocessor company. And I remember Andy Grove, with whom I taught for a long time, telling me that at one point Gordon Moore, the famous Gordon Moore, at a top management meeting said, if we really are going to transform ourselves from a semiconductor company that we now are into a microprocessor company, 5 years from now or less, half of this group will be replaced by software and related people. And Andy Grove said, I went out of the room and I started learning software as soon as I can. So that's the challenge that the top management of companies that are faced with this particular type of change have to deal with. How fast can they actually adjust? That is extremely difficult. But if I may make one more comment on this, because I teach strategy, and so if you ask me, what does that mean? That means you are trying to manage the forces as opposed to having the forces managing you. So what are the forces? So I rely here, I read a fair amount outside of my business, on an analysis that actually Henry Kissinger did in his book called World Order, which was published a few years ago. And he basically says, he analyzes the force of the internet. And he says basically what the internet does, with all the brilliant things that it allows us to do, it actually leads us to focus on the actual rather than the contingent. In other words, what is happening rather about what could happen. On the factual rather than the conceptual. In other words, we just deal with all these things and we don't step back and try to conceptualize them. And maybe most importantly, he says values are basically shaped by consensus rather than by introspection. I think that's very dangerous if you stay on the left side of that set. And in fact, if I may quote here, I was actually surprised because in the book he quotes one of my favorite poets, which is Thomas Stearns Eliot, who 70 years ago, in one of his long poems, he asked the following questions. First he said, where is the life that we have lost in living? That has not much to do with our topic tonight. But the second question is really important, because he asked, where is the wisdom that we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge that we have lost in information? And if he would live today, what would be the next question? Where is the information that we have lost in data? So that means there is 4 inequalities. Wisdom greater than knowledge, greater than information, greater than data. And if we're the dean of the management of the Antwerp Management School, I would be concerned that everything is going to be about data and nothing about wisdom.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. Maybe to close off this topic, maybe a final question to Winston Ma. We looked at obviously the data that we feed ourselves into the system via Facebook, via Google, etc. We abandon data to the system on a scale that we wouldn't even trust a government with when it comes to these data. Yeah. There's lots of questions you can ask on how does it affect society, personal lives of people, cohesion of societies, sure. The spread of fake news, polarization. Yeah. How do you see this panning out? Because owning a lot of data makes you powerful as a government or as Facebook or Google, etc. Who should govern these data? Is it the citizens themselves? Is it politics? Is there some kind of automatic order which will emerge? How do you see this evolving?
Yeah, clearly there's no clear answer, right? Because actually noticed that this video was created by World Economic Forum, Davos, right? So on global data governance, I think WEF's, I'm part of the WEF's Digital Economy Council. So I think WEF's approach is quote-unquote multi-stakeholders approach, right? Essentially, Davos' thinking is we should engage all the stakeholders, come up with governance, answer the questions about who owns the data, who who can use the data, so on and so forth. But there's another group of thinking, which is a multinational approach, for which probably China is one of the parties, but I think many emerging markets also in that group. That is, you have to solve the data sovereignty at the sovereignty level first before you deal with the individual level. So right now, we clearly don't see which one is more advanced. But these days, we continue to see G7, G20 getting engaged on this topic. So personally, I think we may still need the multinational approach, especially the leading economies, especially when you think about the fact that the digital economy has strong character of economic scale, which means the stronger digital economy will become stronger. The bigger digital economy will become bigger, right? So I think these leading economies will have the opportunity as well as the obligation to make the initial progress on the global data governance.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Now, since the topic of this debate tonight is sustainable transformation, I think if we look at transformation, sustainable transformation, there's one country that springs to mind, and that's obviously China. So the last 40 years, China has worked itself up from an isolated agrarian nation to one that can no longer be ignored on the international stage. And this impressive leap forward has led to many political, societal, and of course, economic evolutions. It is therefore extremely interesting to keep an eye on this nation in the years to come, and that's why I wanted to introduce the second topic, namely China, with this small video.
In 1978, China was emerging from its Cultural Revolution as one of the world's poorest nations. Its revolutionary leader, Chairman Mao, had just died in 1976. And his ideological drive to enforce his brand of communism left the country's social and cultural institutions devastated, and the economy in tatters. 88% of people were living in absolute poverty. China's economy was just 5% of the United States', and its GDP per capita was the equivalent of Zambia's. Fast forward 40 years, and China is unrecognisable. It's the world's second biggest economy, with GDP per capita up 50-fold. 700 million people have been lifted out of poverty, and its share of the global economy has gone from 1.8% in 1978 to 18.2% in 2017. So how did one of the world's poorest countries become a global superpower in just 4 decades? The death of Mao Zedong in 1976 brought with it radical changes for the Chinese Communist Party and the nation. When Deng Xiaoping became a key player in China's leadership in 1978, he embarked on a reform initiative aimed at opening up the economically and politically isolated People's Republic of China. He helped establish formal diplomatic ties with the United States and began opening up China to the world. From the years 1949 to 1978, only 200,000 Chinese citizens had travelled overseas. In 2017 alone, Chinese citizens made 130 million overseas trips, and 139 million foreigners journeyed to China. But most importantly, Deng Xiaoping radically shifted China's economy. Its 4-decade-long economic boom was built on embracing capitalism and encouraging private business, in stark contrast to the poorly managed state-run enterprises led by Mao. As multinational companies flocked to China, it quickly became the world's manufacturing hub, and growth became and still remains the Chinese Communist Party's #1 priority. Deng Xiaoping changed the face of China forever. His successors have maintained his push for growth and his mantra of socialism, but with Chinese characteristics. And now President Xi Jinping is embarking on his own raft of ambitious plans. His One Belt, One Road initiative hopes to create a global trade network with China at its centre, and his increasingly bullish foreign policy could see him muscle out the United States as the key economic and military power in the Asia Pacific.
Professor Bergelman, when we talk about transformations, I believe that China's transformation in the past 40 years will be looked at even in centuries' time as one of the most impressive transformations countries have ever underwent. Poor agrarian nation to economic powerhouse. What do you see as lessons that other countries could take from what China has done over the past couple of years? So why doesn't every poor country just follow China's footsteps and become a rich country in 4 years' time?
Well, first of all, Chinese have always been very entrepreneurial. Deng Xiaoping had a famous statement when in 1978 he led the Chinese economy going more into a managed but market economy, where he said, we crossed the river by feeling for the stones. And the stones were already the small entrepreneurial initiatives that Chinese, at great personal risk, were taking. In fact, they mutually insured themselves if they were to be caught by the government and if something would happen to them. So China has an incredible entrepreneurial drive. Everywhere in the world where you go, you find coastal cities, you find Chinese, including in San Francisco. So I think that that there is a natural life force, entrepreneurial force among the Chinese people. Okay, good. So we can try to emulate some of that. But I think the real challenge that China faces, as opposed to talking about how other countries can try to emulate what they have done, which I think is actually difficult, is this. So I was in China the last time in March. I actually had a book that was translated in Chinese. So I spoke there for, there's like 500 people. And the younger people that invited me, one of them is the dean actually of the online school that spun out of Tsinghua University. So I asked them, how do you guys feel about Mr. Xi and the current regime? And he said, well, okay, I should not quote this person. I think what he said was, well, we're not very happy about it. And these are the young Chinese, highly educated, very bright. But then I asked him, well, but suppose you were part of the Chinese government. How do you manage 1.4 billion people? We have no idea about that. Zero. How do you keep 1.4 billion people in some kind of order? We couldn't even imagine if there was chaos in that country. So I told him, why don't you think about a different kind of governance system that would help deal with the things that you don't like, but you can't just blaming the government, not doing very much. Right? So I think it's an incredible challenge. 1.4 billion people. We have no idea what that means. I don't.
It's a huge challenge indeed to manage that amount of people. I think there's other challenges for China as well. Winston Ma.
Yes.
With great powers come great responsibilities. China has grown enormously over the past couple of decades. It's assumed its position from a poor agrarian nation to technological leader, etc. What are the next steps for China on the world stage? We clearly see that the current conflict with the US fears it will lose its prime position, its hegemony in worldwide, and that there's a challenger on the block, just like the United Kingdom, Great Britain was replaced by the United States at the early 20th century. How do you see this panning out in the next couple of years?
Yes, I think this will continue to go back to the data governance issue, because I think part of this tension, right, is about the trade surplus deficit, what have you, for import-export. But a lot of part is about the future, about the innovation power and the overall national competitiveness in the new economy. And it all starts with some analogy that I personally don't agree, which says data is the oil of the future economy, right? Because with that kind of analogy, where people would say, oh, whoever has the data will have the better AI. Whoever has a better AI will have a stronger new economy. And then actually the one has a stronger new economy will become the new military superpower, right? So because of this quote-unquote dangerous analogy, right, data is now linked to military superpower. And I think this is partly behind the existing tension. Now, when there's uncertainty about the future economy, very naturally, every side wants to be very protective and it wants to make the first move, or at least to keep the advantage. So this is that's the tension we are seeing right now, right? And I think unless we can develop a global new governance standards for the data economy, just like the WTO for the import-export economy several decades ago, we will not be able to find that equivalent, a new equilibrium, so that we can have a new protocol to collaborate and develop things together.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for that, I think when you say strength leads to responsibilities, I think that's where China can contribute, because it is now the largest internet user market in the world. So clearly it can play a role in setting up the future internet and the data governance for the global market. And I think it is also in the interest of other countries, right, to engage China on that topic.
Yep. Okay. Now when it comes to let's say a developing country or an extremely poor country transforming itself into an economic powerhouse, that obviously brings us to the topic of Africa, which is right now where China was a couple of decades ago. Now, when it comes to transformation, digitalization, Africa is typically not the first continent that comes to mind. However, there are many signals that suggest that Africa could have a very bright future. Political changes, demographic advantages, the population will quadruple this century from 1.1 billion to 4.4 billion in Africa, as well as foreign investment could all play a role in Africa's favor to become an important player in the future. I suggest we look at the video on Africa.
The planet's population is 7.5 billion and growing every year. By 2050, it's estimated to be close to 10 billion. This population boom will be dominated by one continent, Africa. In just 30 years, the US will be overtaken by Nigeria to become the world's third most populated country behind China and India. And by the end of the 21st century, 4 billion people will live in Africa, making up 36% of the world's population. Africa has the second largest population after Asia, but it's far less dense than Europe's. So if it has the space to accommodate more people, then why are so many analysts worried? Because they believe Africa doesn't have the infrastructure to handle it. In Nigeria, the National Population Commission says this increase puts a severe strain on a nation to provide enough schools and health facilities. Add in an extra billion or so people in the next 30 years and you have a big problem. And it's not just Africa that will face the consequences. The reason for Africa's rapid population growth is down to improvements in public healthcare, which has not only increased life expectancy, but also led to an inspiring decrease in the number of deaths amongst babies and infants. While sub-Saharan women are having less children than 50 years ago, it hasn't prevented the dramatic upsurge in populace. Many experts warn that African birth rates are too high and that family planning programs designed to increase education and prosperity for women haven't had the same attention, resulting in only some, if not any, reduction in fertility rates. This has largely come down to the reluctance by men to use contraception due to religious teachings, social norms, and misinformation about the side effects. Some activists, however, argue that Western NGOs and governments are discussing African population reduction not because the continent is unable to feed its 2 billion people, but because those same Western governments want to preserve African resources for their own people instead. The US and Europe consume 80% of the world's natural resources, but represent just under 15% of the world's population. Western nations, particularly in Europe, may also be motivated by the ongoing migration crisis. Europe has witnessed unprecedented levels of migration arriving on its Mediterranean coastline, following the Arab Spring in 2011 and the ongoing Syrian civil war. And as the African population grows, the influx of migrants looks set to intensify. In Africa, the side effects are numerous, from pressures on food and water supplies to an increased threat of corruption at local and national levels. So, what are the solutions? It's called a demographic dividend. Governments across sub-Saharan Africa will be hoping that fast population growth will create a young workforce that can drive economic growth. But that can only happen if there are enough jobs for them to fill. According to recent research, between 18 and 20 million jobs will need to be created across the continent over the next 25 years. And if that doesn't happen, millions of unemployed young people will become a perfect recruiting environment for both militant Islamist group Boko Haram and human traffickers selling dreams of a better life in Europe. So where do the jobs come from? Some countries are focusing on an industrial revolution, turning farmers and fishermen into makers. Ethiopia, for instance, is the fastest growing economy on the continent, and it's all built on massive infrastructure investment. They now have brand new 6-lane highways, electric railways, and vast social housing estates. But in Nigeria's largest city, Lagos, the need for new housing has created new problems. Vast slums in the megacity have been bulldozed to make way for luxury high-rise apartments, despite alleged court orders to halt the destruction. Authorities argue that people are being resettled and compensation is being paid, but rising inequality is a real concern. The fact remains that with millions still living in poverty and a population that is set to rise at a dramatic rate, the continent will face serious challenges. Regardless of their motivations, both non-African and African nations have a role to play to turn the continent's rapid population growth into a positive, more modern, sustainable environment.
Okay, Ms. Mabasa Koyana, when we look at Africa, when we look at what the journalist in the documentary just said, we have strong population growth, we have a quadrupling of population in the next couple of decades, rising life expectancy, translating into a demographic dividend. Why isn't Africa growing, or what are we lacking? What is still needed when it comes to transforming this into a success story?
Yeah, that's correct. In fact, in that video, there's so many topics that you can actually touch on. And I know you're going to touch on the inequality one later. You know, you ask yourself a question that in a continent that is so well endowed with resources, natural resources, in addition to this youth that we're saying, how do we leverage? I don't think as Africa, we quickly worked on a plan like how China and India did on their youth. It took us a long time. We're only waking up to that now. Having said that, there are pockets of success in the continent because it's got 54 countries. We also can't talk about Africa as if it's one amorphous animal. If you look at the success stories of Rwanda, you look at Ethiopia is one of them, South Africa at some point, but it comes to the core of it is that it is the leadership. You know, we can have digitization, but the leadership issue is at the core of where Africa is today, because it just tells you that whether it is natural resources or human resources, they are just not properly governed. The World Bank has committed $25 billion, and they've asked the private sector to match that because of the opportunities that are being seen in the continent. Train this youth. They just need to be trained and skilled to be able to, be active in sectors like agriculture. We've got vast land. We've got a food problem when you talk about poverty. Yet, we are very thin on agriculture. Beneficiate. Most African countries take these resources, sell them to Europe, and then buy them back with a very weak currency when they've been beneficiated. We can beneficiate our own chocolates instead of selling the cocoa to Belgium, as an example. And maybe that's a collaboration between Belgium and Kenya and other countries that produce cocoa. South Africa and Botswana, again, interestingly enough, it touches on Belgium again. These are countries with diamond mines, and the diamonds would leave the continent to the west, and then we buy them back. So there are vast opportunities of beneficiation, which can be coupled with the digitization and bring in that investment, because even that $25 billion is specifically for digital infrastructure.
When it comes to Africa, often we hear that there's a governance issue in Africa. That's sometimes a code word for corruption, which holds back the growth of the content of different countries. How do you see this panning out? Are some countries taking more initiatives than others? How do you see this happening?
It's true. In fact, in South Africa in particular, we were on a great trajectory after our new democracy with the new President Mandela, who was a global icon, came with a value system on leadership, on forgiveness, to build a country for everybody who lives in it and for everybody's benefit. The last 10 years, we allowed corruption to creep in, and actually, South Africa lost so much ground. As a result, I think in the continent, if you look at the importance of civil groups, civil society, those are the groups and the youth that actually revolted for South Africa to have a change in regime and actually say enough is enough. Because after the political independence, everybody had hope, not just in South Africa, in other countries as well in the continent. But when the masses saw that it is not translating to an improved life for me, but for a few people who then spend that money, not in the continent, but elsewhere, this is what has now created the revolt. In certain countries, that revolt has actually helped because it has forced the change regime, like in South Africa. We are now on the new dawn. There's still many challenges, but this is where the role of civil society comes in, because political organizations will always play politics.
Thank you very much. Professor De Haas, I want to come back to you when it comes to governance and digitization. Often it is said that a technology like blockchain, for example, could eradicate corruption in certain countries, because you could actually foolproof documents which make sure you don't need any bribes, etc. So that's a way how technology could actually, digitization could actually advance democratic processes. How do you see digitalization in general impacting Africa? What would the opportunities be for them?
Well, I would like to respond on a call of Cindy, in fact. She's saying that the potential is enormous, but one of the challenges that you have is that the revolution or the transformation should come within, using the talent that you have in Africa. And I think one of the challenges that you see is that how can you reach out to that talent and give them access to education, primary education, secondary education, or even a business school or university education. And if I refer back to my opening speech, that is exactly an answer to your call for action, where we want to give access to the huge group of talented entrepreneurs, potentially in Africa, that we need to give access to higher education or business school education. So through those grants, We would like to give them access to the education, but we also would like to contribute to sustainable transformation by forcing them to go back to their local community and then coaching them to make sure that whatever type of transformation it might be, a digital transformation or another innovation that they have in mind, that we are sure that through the education here, they contribute to the development of their local community. I think that's the only way. It's a long-term path towards really building up the communities in Africa.
We'll hold you up to that.
That's okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Briefly, Cindy touched upon equality, inequality that digitization or development brings with it. And so we might be going through another wave of modernization, but this is not necessarily experienced by everyone. In many industries and regions in the world, civil and labor rights don't seem to be able to catch up with the pace at which technological and economic developments occur. And this is, of course, problematic because these very people to whom the inequality applies form the backbone of the economy. Now, let's look at the small introductory video on inequality.
Women who work full-time still earn 15% less than men. But that's not because they're paid less for the same jobs. It's because they're in different jobs. Women are in less senior jobs. In Britain, France, and Germany, 80 to 90% of executive jobs are held by men. Women also tend to choose different occupations. In America, over 80% of teachers, nurses, secretaries, and health workers are female, and these jobs tend to be lower paid. Primary school teachers in the West earn nearly 20% less than the average graduate job. Nurses earn less than police officers, cleaners less than caretakers. Women are as ambitious as men. They earn the majority of university degrees. In America, they now ask for promotions as often as men. But it's the price women pay for motherhood that holds them back. In Britain, 70% of mothers reduce their working hours or switch to a less demanding job, compared with 11% of fathers. In Australia, it's 56% of mothers and 19% of fathers. While in France, 55% of mothers scale back, compared with 13% of fathers. When an American woman goes back to work, her salary is on average lower than it would have been if she hadn't had a child. The race for gender equality is far from over. As more children choose non-traditional careers and men do more childcare, fewer working women will be held back.
Okay, so different forms of inequality. Let's look at the digital job divide. So digital skills versus non-digital skills. Is there a divide there? Now also the gender job divide. Now when it comes to the gender job divide, a number of the things we've seen here. How do we tackle this? We've seen that career choices might be different. Scaling back of work after pregnancy might be different. How can we tackle this, if ever?
Right. I guess the gap is still wide. However, we must acknowledge that there's a lot of work that has been done. It is getting narrower. However, there's still a lot of work. What has assisted it, obviously, is the legislation. In some countries, for example, in South Africa, businesses, for them to be able to do business with government, you have to be 51% black-owned in some industries, it's by sector, and you need to have 30% women in your organization. We've seen globally the 30% club. The UN has come for the he for she, where they expect men to work together and even be the ones, because they are the ones who are in power, who need to actually give way and set policies even in the organizations that allow women to thrive. So that is already in place. However, we would not do enough work on gender equality if we do not touch on the unconscious bias. because that is the big elephant in the room that needs to be tackled. And one of the ways of doing it is doing reverse mentoring, because I do believe that in some instances, men don't do it because they just want to do it deliberately, but because they don't know how to actually embrace and work with a woman colleague. So in some instances, what I have found working is reverse mentorship, where a woman who is junior to a man mentors the man and conscientizes them. So one of the key things around inequality is to always think that the only person who must be empowered is only the one who at that stage appears to be lesser than the other. Whereas it will always be a better life for all if we all realize that we can learn from each other. So those are some of the key things when we look at women empowerment. Women have done a lot of work. A lot of women organizations still have a place today, and I think women need to tap themselves at the back. However, the job is not yet done.
Okay, thank you. Winston Ma, I want to come to you when it comes to, we had the gender divide that we talked about. There's also a digital divide, obviously. So in the past, when hard work made the difference, men took the most senior positions.
Yes.
When pregnancy makes a difference, that's when men make the senior positions. But when digitization, your knowledge of the digital economy, data economy becomes important, will we see a digital divide in which people who are not up to speed with the latest technologies will lag behind and just see that the haves and the have-nots, whether you have digital skills or not, determines inequality in society? How do you see that?
Definitely. That's a huge challenge, because if you noticed what Cindy talked earlier, right? She used the word training, right? And also used the word infrastructure. It's very easy to think about the digital divide is an infrastructure issue, which obviously it starts with it, because 2019 is the first year the world just reached more than 50% of internet access to everyone. So even by today, that's only just like 1 out of 2 people have basic internet access, right? So certainly there's an infrastructure level, but we have to think beyond the networks and the towers, right? Because besides the connectivity, then you also need the spread of mobile devices. Now China is very lucky because China is the world factory. So during the mobile boom, Chinese manufacturers were able to generate high quality, low price domestic brands. So a large percentage of 800 mobile internet users actually have access to relatively cheaper mobile devices, but some other countries may not have that luxury. And then besides the devices and the connectivity, then you also need the digital literacy, right? Because without knowing the in and outs, actually, the users cannot be active users, but you want them to be the active users in the ecosystem to make it a positive feedback system, right? So in terms of this infrastructure, there's so much need, so much more than just the basic networks and the tower infrastructures, but huge collective efforts from all parts of the world economy to consider this as an ecosystem, that you need the basic connectivity, but then you also have to think about the spread of devices just as like the spread of electricity. And then you also need to focus on the digital literacy education, just like the basic math education, because people won't be relevant in the future ecosystem if they cannot be an active user in the ecosystem.
Professor Bergelin, you have something to add to that? I mean, how data and inequality?
Okay, yeah. So first, I think, following up on Winston here, that access, let's say, to the internet without education is not necessarily a good thing. We saw that in the spring in Arabia. But that's not the point I thought which I wanted to add. There is another one. We haven't talked about artificial intelligence, right? And there is a new form of artificial intelligence which is potentially a force multiplier for inequality, and that's as follows. So if you ask, what is really how is the fourth industrial revolution really different from the previous three? Man, the number 2, electricity, was probably as important as, imagine all the lights went out here. Man, it would be worse than our cell phones that don't work, right? But there is a new form of AI coming, which is where AI itself develops new knowledge. All knowledge so far has been embodied in people. And all new knowledge is embodied in people. AI makes it potentially possible to generate disembodied new knowledge. Then the question is, who is going to own that new knowledge? To get the new knowledge demands extraordinary amounts of computing capacity. That's very expensive. So it's going to deep think from Google and the Facebook guys and Amazon, and they are going to potentially own this disembodied capital. And so now this is a joke in a way, but I'm fearful that we're going to have a new Karl Marx coming along who will write something in German that's körperlos Wissenschaftskapital. And then we're up for a new revolution. So we should take this seriously. This is coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the interest of time.
Man, you talk about inequality.
Exactly. A different set of have-nots. Huh? Have-nots.
Okay, when it comes to, in the interest of time, when talking about AI, German philosophers making up a new revolution, I think we arrived at the future of Europe. So in the interest of time, we'll look at a very short video on the biggest problems of Europe. Yeah. And what I'll ask you to do, rather than have the debate, because otherwise we're going to run out until after midnight, I'll ask each and every one of you to look at the perspective outside in, from Europe. What do you see as the future of Europe? What is the biggest challenge, and how can we tackle this? A bit of inspiration you will find in the next video, and then it's up to you to come up with, let's say, lessons for the audience. What should Europe actually do?
What are Europe's biggest problems? Not Brexit, not migration, not populism. Europe faces 3 much larger challenges: climate change, aging populations, digital revolutions. Their effects are already transforming Europe and could make handling issues such as migration even harder. So it's time to change the debate.
This year, a new EU leadership will take office.
It must develop new policies to move to a low-carbon economy, help people learn new skills at any age, maintain a strong and flexible labour force, and protect Europeans' security and quality of life. The EU has a unique advantage. It has a history of solving problems and sticking to commitments. With 500 million people, it has the capacity to take collective action and the resources to invest in innovation. It can call on Europe's broad expertise, political will, and diverse, engaged communities. Will the EU rise to the occasion, or will it lose the ability to shape its future?
So, final topic, and the one we have to tackle in the least amount of time, future of Europe. So let's maybe start with Professor Bergelman. You, of course, are privileged to be born in Belgium, educated in Belgium, worked in the US for a long time, and look from the outside in. Let's say the future of Europe. I mean, let's keep it short. What would be your advice to European leaders as well as business people as far as the future is concerned?
I can make it very short. At one line. It's the peers plus 1, and the 1 is missing.
The 1 is missing, okay. Winston Ma, I would say Europe is a flyover continent for you, but I guess going from Beijing to New York, you cross the Pacific, so for Europeans it would be between the US and China. So where do you see the future of Europe, and what do you think the big challenges are?
I think the challenge is to form a unified market. Because as a global investor, when you think about technology investments, in particular internet digital platforms with lots of users, right? Naturally, it's China and the US because they have large users. But in Europe, the markets are very fragmented. So when you look at the China mobile market, right, it has the largest user number, 800 million. And also, but more importantly, it becomes a new source of power in the age of AI because it generates uniform data. And that's because the 800 million users, they are unified by mobile devices, but more importantly, they are unified by the same mobile payment. And most importantly, they are unified by the same culture and the same language. And that makes this group, this market, extraordinarily powerful.
Okay, thank you very much. Professor De Haas, the future of Europe, you basically work and operate in the center of Europe, Antwerp. What do you see the biggest challenge for Europe is?
Well, obviously many challenges, and just to add something different to the things I fully agree with, in the afternoon here in the school we had a whole debate on paradoxes in leadership. So if you refer to leadership in Europe, I think the leadership should overcome a too simplistic black and white discussion of either going towards a fully more centralized governing way of doing things in Europe versus the decentralized and giving the local countries more autonomy. So if you keep on sticking in that too easy black and white debate, I don't think we will go any step further. So I think the leadership of Europe should make sure that they can think in paradoxes and find that appropriate balance in the interest of the whole European Union.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Mabasa Koyana, when it comes to Africa, Europe is about your closest neighbor. China has been very active and very present over the past couple of years and decades. What do you see the role of Europe in the next couple of years?
Certainly an opportunity for collaboration. If you look at the aging population in Europe, we've got a younger population because I'm sure that population dips into health insurance, your pension, and on the other hand, we have a younger human capital force. So there has to be a way of complementing one another. And I do see Europe being that one partner from an investment in the skills point of view. At the same time, expecting those governments to also match it and meet it through proper governance, better regulation, and reduced corruption. And the truth of the matter is that we all need to start seeing this world as one, because a gap on the other side quickly comes into your space. We cannot afford to have a them and us. And that is why sometimes the nationalism surprises me in a world where we actually cannot afford it.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, to conclude, it took, in the novel of Jules Verne, it took 80 days in a balloon to travel around the world. This evening, it only took 4 panelists and about 1 hour to do the same. We had digitization, we had China, Africa, inequality as well as Europe, and we hope to have opened your minds to impact the world. And I want to thank the people who've contributed to this very fruitful debate, Ms. Mabasa Koyana, Professor De Haas, Winston Ma, and Professor Bergelman.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, a big applause for the panel and Peter de Keyser. I think this was very inspiring, fantastic insights which would have deserved far more time than the hour you have given us. But thank you, and let us continue with other inspiring people. That's what, among others, this business school is all about. And we've been looking to the future. Well, when preparing the future, one has to look at the past as well. Not only to learn from the mistakes made, but also to celebrate, to appreciate what has been accomplished. And that is exactly what we are going to do now. So may I invite Mrs. Mimi Lamotte, President of the Antwerp Management School alumni, to join me on stage. Thank you. Please. Because, Mimi, you will have the honor of handing over this beautiful trophy to the Global Citizen 2019. Before doing that, where's the trophy? Do we have it? It's here. Okay. Thank you very much. Look out, it is really heavy. Maybe I...
You keep it.
I'll keep it for you. Plexiglass, a stone. What can you tell us about this beautiful, unique, especially created trophy?
Well, I was told it's a kimberlined fragmented rock.
Okay.
Kimberline should be a mine where you find rough diamonds.
Yeah, the Kimberley is a mine. Is also the name for not blood diamonds. It's a Kimberley certificate you get.
Inside that rock, piece of rock, there is a rough diamond.
A rough diamond, a not cut diamond for one who has been shaped for years now.
So it's a pretty fashionable piece, I would say.
A pretty fashionable piece. I'm going to put it here on the piano, not break it. Okay, like this. Because I have another question. This trophy is given every 2 years. Since 2011, there's a number of people who already preceded our new winner.
Yeah, there were 4 winners. So we had first Baron Jacques Rogge.
Oops.
So
sorry?
He was the former president of the International Olympic Committee.
Yeah,
Then
Belgian, Olympic champion as well.
Then there was Thomas Bergström. He's the founder of IKEA.
IKEA.
And then there was Peter Piot, who was quite famous for discovering the HIV and the Ebola
virus now.
And then the 4th winner was Mrs. Theresa de Keersmaker, and she is a world-famous choreographer.
Okay, that's a quite impressive series of very brilliant people.
Yeah,
and our
unique
new
people.
winner is nothing less than that. So, before introducing him, let's watch a little video.
The last thing what I want to do is kind of a fashion dictatorship. I create garments, and for me it's then just to the people to use them. So it's just like one element, and then they can do whatever they want with it. It's our use of color and material. That's really our special thing, and that's something which I enjoy most, in fact. Creating my fabric, it's a little bit like a painter creates his colors on a palette. I'm born into fashion. My parents started in the 70s their own store where they were selling menswear, womenswear. As a young boy, I was always running around in that store. I thought it was fantastic. So for me, becoming a fashion designer was a rather obvious choice. Fashion was changing so fast in the end of the 70s, early 80s. You had all those new fashion designers popping up. You had English, you had punk, you had Vivienne Westwood, John Galliano, you have Spanish, Japanese. We grew up in the middle of that. We studied in the middle of all these things, so it was very stimulating. So of course, making the jump and say, okay, we also going to be fashion designers, and now coming from Antwerp was really scary, because nobody even could expect there was going to be fashion coming out of Belgium, because nobody really imagined that there was a fashionable country. But then, of course, yeah, we succeeded. But it was also the right moment to do things like that. I like to create things. It's not that we just make garments. I think we make garments with the soul. I'm a perfectionist and always say like, oh, pity, I would have loved to change still that, and oh, maybe if you would have seen this fabric before, I would have created a different shape in it and all these things. Most of the time I'm happy with the collection, but still, yeah, I wanted still always to change a little bit.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 2019 Global Citizen, Dries van Noten.
Thank you. Thank you. Hartelijk dank.
Congratulations.
Dank u. Okay. Prachtig.
Does it surprise you?
Every award is always kind of a surprise because it always comes in from a different angle, and it's also given by other type of people. So for me, it's always like really very rewarding and making it like, okay, we have to go on, we have to do more things, we have to do surprise people, and that's of course, yeah, it's a beautiful thing for me.
Okay. Is it something that still makes you glad that you still appreciate, because it's not the first award you get, of course?
It's not the first award, but of course it comes also from here, from Antwerp, which of course is a special place for me. It still is my hometown, so in that way it makes it again special.
It's a town where it all started, of course.
It's a town where everything started, and also which is now still the place where I work. I don't live anymore in Antwerp, but just out in the outskirts. But still, for me, Antwerp is a perfect base. It's a special city in that way that it's not very big. It's close by other cities, but it gives you space. And I think especially in the time of internet and everything, space and sometimes calmness is very, very important. And for me, it's really kind of a place which is a healthy distance from the really big fashion city. It's a big fashion cities, and in that way, it's really very good.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about these fashion cities. Your ever first label for men, you launched it in 1985. First collection for women, real collection for Mimi, 2 years later, 1987. First real fashion show in Paris, 1991. So basically, you've been producing, designing, creating, thinking of 4 collections a year for almost 35 years. How on earth do you get your inspiration still?
Inspiration comes from everywhere, and I think for me it's very important that inspiration can come from places where you don't always expect it. Being a creative person, you have to keep your eyes open, and I think fashion has, in one way or another, has to be a reflection of what's happening in the world.
So traveling a lot, going to movies, that kind of thing?
That kind of thing, yes, but also looking at small things, exhibitions, artists, poems, a smell. Inspiration can come from so many different things.
Yeah. Oh, your garden, your beautiful garden.
The garden last collection was inspired indeed on flowers, but then not just like beautiful flowers, it was wilting flowers, flowers which have diseases and things like that. Because for the moment, I think the world is not a very particular pretty place. So for me, it was very interesting to show flowers where their things are not going so well.
Okay.
No, but the inspiration is really, it's something very magical. And inspiration can come often also from confrontation. So when I work together with my team, I don't want to have a team who thinks like me. I really want to have young people around me who shock me, who surprise me. When I say white, that they say black.
So it is teamwork. It's a process you're going through?
It's a process, but the process can't become a system. Because my role is really to think out of the box, not to make things what people are expecting. And so in the talk before, we saw a lot about internet, a lot about digital. Very interesting, fantastic for us. But once in a while, we say on the 4th floor, which is our floor in the office building where we are in the creatives, now everybody just put your computers off, no phones anymore, and just today we just go through books.
Yeah, okay.
We talk, no computers because we want to change IDs. Yes. Things like that.
No,
so
no digitization, just analog,
you need
creative process.
For the moment in the creation, you need both. And it's very easy that you lose yourself only to look at things. But then in that moment, you start to create elements, like you start to create clothes, what people expect.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
you have to surprise them.
You have to surprise them, but this is a business school, it stands for innovation, and that's also applying new techniques, new ways of dealing with things. Let's talk a bit about design thinking. Is this something you apply to your creation process? I mean, in terms of, do you go and really want to know your user, your client, a woman or man who will wear your clothes? Do you seek to understand him? Do you, challenge strategies, redefine problems you encounter? Is this really something you do before starting to create?
No, it all goes together. Of course, I need information. I have my team who tells me everything what I need to know. But at a certain moment, you have to forget all that. Mm-hmm. Because you really have to, again, you have to be free to create. When you really start to think into boxes, that's not the right way. So for me, bringing in colors, bringing printing motifs, but to the whole message of what the collection has to send out, it's really, so it has to be something coming from your soul and not from your brain.
Exactly.
So, and in that way, that's the most important thing.
Okay. Mimi, you're not only the president of the alumni of Antwerp Management School, Mimi Lamote is also the CEO of a fashion brand, boutique fashion brand, I should say, Mayerline. Another sector in fashion. Do you work according to design thinking processes? Are you really going to understand, to research the client?
Well, in the company you have like the rational people and we have the designers, where those people, they feel and they have much more emotions. For me, they're very emotional people. And the rational people, they analyze, they look at the figures, and they also look what sells well during the season. But during the same season, our designers, they create for the next year. So we often have meetings with them where we expose the results. And they're very keen to know how their collections are selling. But of course, they also want to know why and why not. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And by letting them living their dream and creating, in the back of their head, they also think of our customer and of what they hear from us.
Okay. How do you balance between the marketing people and the creators?
Balance is a very important word here, because if you would put them with too much information and figures, they would block. And they even say that. They say, if you overwhelm us with figures or with facts, we cannot dream and think anymore. So we do that on certain moments where they propose their prototypes, and then we give them input, what we think. But in the end, they need to have their play field.
Mm-hmm. Do you think your way of working will still evolve with time? How do you see it changing?
I think it will still evolve because, of course, the way we present the data can be better. But in the end, in the first phase, I think a designer should be able to dream and create innovative styles without too much framework.
Okay. Mr. Van Noten, we've been talking about the future a lot. Let's talk about the future of the brand, Dries Van Noten. How do you see it for the next coming years, for longer term?
So, of course, quite a lot of things changed, because I was always like completely the example of the independent designer, one of the few which was left. Until last year, of course, I partnered with the Spanish group Puig. Puig was, of course, like a very nice choice for us. When they approached us, there was immediately a click, because they really look at all their fashion houses as individuals. So in that way, it really helps us, because I was always very proud of being independent, and I said, like, okay, independency gives full freedom, that you can take all your decisions, what you want, whatever you want to know. Until I saw that the company became a size, that I had so much responsibility over all the people working for us. All our manufacturers, we do a lot of embroidery in India. There we have a few thousand people for us working on embroidery. So at a certain moment we said, yeah, okay, I'm independent and I can take my own decisions, but I'm also trapped. So in this way, we have now really kind of a structure together with Puig, that I know that my brand will continue, and that there is like a future for me. And also, I think for me, it's a big weight off my shoulders in that way, that you know that, okay, we are not alone there, so you have the support.
Yes.
And it pushes even my creativity, I think, because in that way you think more free.
Yeah, that looks great. How about the future of the man, Dries van Noten?
For me, I love creation. I love designing collections. For me, it's kind of, I'm addicted to it. So, of course, running a business besides then only designing and everything is very tough. Of course, I have a very great team. Now, of course, with the help of our new partners, we can create a more solid structure as a company, and in that way, for me, creation becomes even more fun. So, okay, I'm aging, I'm getting older, but I still feel very young, so there is no problem, I think.
Age is only here.
Yeah.
It's just a number. Okay, so bright future for you, for the company. Congratulations again. Thank you for having been with us. Thank you, Mrs. Limit and Mote. Ladies and gentlemen, Global Citizen 2019. And be sure to take that trophy with you home. And I would like now to invite Jeff Neve to the stage, please. Probably comes as a bit of a surprise to you. I've juggled a bit with... ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the two persons who will be doing the last part of this evening. We need a bit of a change on the stage, and that's why I wanted to invite you here. So the people will start changing the piano, and we'll have a chat.